Hi, everyone, and welcome to the show. This is episode number 6 of Pop Culturally Deprived, and today we're going to be talking about the first 5 episodes of Firefly on your Captain Tight Pants podcast. It is important to note that we are watching these in the intended order, not the order they originally aired, just so you can keep up with us. Today I'm joined by 2 co hosts, Sarah Howe and Matthew Vose. Welcome to your very first podcast, Sarah.
Thanks.
Sarah and I also met through the Sunday Assembly community. Are you guys sensing a trend from where all of my people come from? So, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, Mandy. As you just mentioned, we met at Sunday Assembly, and when I heard you were doing this Firefly podcast, I was like, dude, that's one of my all-time favorite shows. So I have to jump in on this. So I'm really thrilled to be discussing it here with you and Matthew.
And welcome back to the show, Matthew.
Thanks a lot for having me, Mandy. I'm really excited to discuss Firefly with you both as well. I watched it when it was originally broadcast in the UK, but that was 2003 after it had been cancelled, so it's always been just these few episodes that we had to watch. I introduced lots of my friends to it. When it came out on DVD, it was about £20, so it was perfect, that Christmas present to buy for everyone and say, watch this, it's awesome. I followed lots of the cast into subsequent projects as well, especially when they've gone off and done voiceovers for DC Comics. The Firefly cast make up about half of the Justice League in recent animated movies.
I didn't know that. I'm not super familiar with DC Comics in either comic form or in any of the animated or movie form, so I might have to check that out.
Yeah, I think Alan Tudyk and Adam Baldwin have both been Superman at times. Nathan Fillion is the go-to Hal Jordan Green Lantern. Summer Glau has done various things in both live action and cartoon because she was an Arrow.
She was an Arrow.
She was an Arrow. Alan Tudyk is, of course, he's an established voice actor for himself now. He's done lots of DC things, Young Justice, and he's done some Robot Chicken and so on, but he's been in basically every Disney Pixar movie for the last 3 or 4 years. He is the Duke of Weselton from Frozen,
I had no idea. I think that's great.
and I got to see Zootropolis the other day, and there's a wonderful bit where he plays a weasel who wants to be called Weaselton.
Zootropolis? Do you mean Zootopia?
No, I mean Zootropolis, because that's what we call it over here. Um,
Really?
yeah, that's a very good point. There is a Danish zoo called Zootopia, so it already had their trademark in Europe, so they called it something else over here.
Oh, wow.
Learn something new every day.
That zoo movie, let's call it that.
It's a good movie. I didn't know Alan Tudyk was in it.
Yeah, he's done Robot Chicken, Moana. He's still done live action stuff, Con Man particularly, which I think we'll probably get to in a future episode. But he's done a lot of voiceover things.
And of course, he was in Rogue One.
He was again doing a voiceover.
Yes. Did not, I recognized the voice and could not place it. And Sarah and I had to look that up when we got home.
Good catch. In a change to normal, I'm going to be doing the history and production info so that Mandy doesn't pick up any spoilers. So, Firefly premiered on the 20th of September 2002, and it was cancelled on the 12th of December 2002. That was after 11 of the 14 episodes had been aired. The show averaged 4.7 million viewers, and it was followed by the movie Serenity in 2005. Firefly was the eagerly awaited new show by Joss Whedon, who was acclaimed by both critics and the TV watching public for his shows Buffy the Vampire Slayer and its spin-off Angel. They were in their 7th and 4th seasons respectively by the time Firefly started.
Can I just jump in here and say that Joss Whedon is he is the man. He is the most awesome producer, director ever. I like everything I've seen that he's done.
And I can second that.
Yeah, he's obviously been a showrunner and creator and director of some really significant projects, and obviously this went on to him doing another TV show and eventually getting The Avengers, which is one of the great action-adventure films. But he's also done so much script doctoring work, films like Speed, Toy Story, Alien 4. He did a lot of work on them.
Yeah, I saw that. I went and looked it up on Wikipedia just to see what his filmography was like. And I was really surprised at how much uncredited script work he's done.
Yeah, I'm going to go on a big tangent here. The credits is a really interesting story. He did a lot of work on Speed, particularly on the dialogue of it, because it just wasn't flowing and it wasn't fun. But there's an issue where if you only work on dialogue, you don't have to be credited in the same way, or you get credited more credit for working on story. I think there's a whole guild regulation about, actors could potentially work on dialogue, so where do they get their credits? So when Speed was released, he was not given a lead writer or any significant credit for it. He was just listed with everyone else. The person who was the lead writer had the opportunity to give it to him, but selfishly took it. And then this situation was reversed when it came to Toy Story, where although Joss did a lot of work for Pixar because they were all developers at the time, they weren't writers, he went in and gave them a good story that they then built off and redid their film from. But because they did so much work, there was a debate over whether they should get the credits, and he said yes, of course they can. So he is a proper good man.
Of course he is. He's Joss Whedon.
Yeah.
I was also surprised to find that he had an uncredited rewrite for Twister. I had no idea, and that was a movie I watched over and over and over again in high school.
That's a film I've not seen, but I can
Nuh-uh.
imagine it from what I know of it.
You should watch that movie.
You,
It's so good.
we need a reverse pop culturally deprived so that we can get him to watch that movie.
I support that.
Absolutely, we'll do that one day. Alien 4 is a sort of prototype for Firefly. There's a group of hardened space cowboy criminal types in the film that are very much, when you watch it, you can go, I can see where he got some of his ideas for Firefly from. So back into what we're doing today, we are going to be discussing the two-part pilot Serenity, which is different from the movie Serenity, so we're going to try and make sure we differentiate if we reference them. We're also going to talk about The Train Job, Bushwhacked, Shindig, and Safe. Although it was developed as the pilot for the show, it had a rumoured $10 million budget. Serenity, the pilot, actually aired in December. Fox, the network who aired and funded Firefly, felt it was too long and too slow. So Joss Whedon and executive producer Tim Minear, they hurriedly developed The Train Job as a new pilot that could remove some of the character introductions and the world building they'd already done.
I really feel this was a disservice to the show, but we can discuss that a little bit more in a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. It had a big impact, I think. The new pilot, Train Job, and Bushwhacked were aired in September, and episodes 4 and 5, Shindig and Safe, were then aired in November. In between those, Fox aired episodes 6, 7, and 8, so as Mandi said up top, we are definitely not going to follow that order. We're going to be going through the intended order when they were first developed. At this point, I'm going to admit something to Mandi here. When we were preparing for the podcast, Sarah and I split the episodes up into these 3 sections on purpose. These first 5 episodes are probably the worst of the 14, and when I say worst, I mean worst of some good TV. But from here on out, the show actually gets a bit different. It's a bit more confident, and the actors are a bit more settled into their roles.
That's actually really good to hear because I'm actually a little disappointed that I'm 5 episodes in, which is almost halfway through, and I don't adore this show. I don't dislike it, but I don't adore it. And so I'm looking forward to seeing it get better from here.
Well, we don't want to hype up your expectations, but hopefully it will.
Hopefully.
I'm sure it will. I had the same experience when I first watched it.
So it's a really funny story about why I've never watched this, considering it's a Joss Whedon work and I love all things Joss Whedon. Initially, I didn't even know Firefly existed. It didn't air on the same networks as Buffy and Angel, so it was a Fox show. And I didn't watch anything else on Fox at that time because, as you've heard previously, when I was a kid, all I watched was stuff on the WB and then UPN when Buffy switched over. So it wasn't advertised anywhere that I would have seen it. So I had no idea that Firefly even existed until well after it was canceled. Now, if Joss's name is attached to something and I know about it, it's an automatic watch. Firefly, I actually own it on DVD. I've owned it on DVD for years, and I always said I'd get around to it. And the main reason I never really got around to it was because I owned it, and so I knew I could watch it anytime. And the stuff that was on Netflix was always a little more pressing because you never know when Netflix is going to get rid of something. And so it just kept sitting there and sitting there and sitting there, and I never got around to it until this podcast came around, and you guys kind of pushed me, hey, you need to do Firefly.
Well, I did try to push you previously before the podcast. And I said, Mandi, you have to watch this. Mandi, you have to watch this. And you didn't listen to me.
Yes, but things on Netflix were always more important because I can watch Firefly anytime. I own it. I'm silly, I know.
And it's funny, 2002 is a year that there's no other TV that really stands out. I probably need to go back and have a look at what was in its second or third season at that point, but there's nothing on the list of debuts that year that goes, oh, okay, that's the year a Grey's Anatomy started, or a show as big as The X-Files or something. All the debuts are shows that cancelled after a season or two.
Yeah, I was still watching the full WB lineup at that point. So Dawson's Creek was still on, Charmed was on, Buffy and Angel. I think Veronica Mars was on at that point too. So I mean, I had a very full slate of TV shows, but they were all pretty well established at that point, and I just didn't know about Firefly.
Yeah, I never watched it either when it was airing because for the same reason as you, I'd never heard of it. Unlike you, I did watch all the different channels. I didn't just stick to the WB and the UPN and then the CW and all the ones that you have stuck to through the years. But still, I cannot recall a single time that it ever came across my knowledge of it back when it was originally airing. I didn't hear about it until I'd say 2008 when I was the first time I remember hearing about it was in 2008 when I was sitting in the break room at my job and a table full of nerds were talking about it. And it kind of, I perked my ears and it started sounding a little interesting, but then still didn't watch it again for another few years.
And like we say, it's a little difficult to get through these first few episodes. They're not bad, but there's nothing too engrossing about them. There's no big story arcs, no continuity going on.
I have to admit that if I weren't watching it for the podcast, I don't know that I would have kept going after the train job, even though I feel like I'm supposed to like it just because everybody that I know who likes the things that I like love this show.
That's where I was at as well. It took me several times to sit down and force myself to pay attention to it, to sit through the whole thing. But then you get to a certain point in the series, and it's just the greatest thing that's ever been made. But these first 5 episodes, really, you have to just kind of sit down, watch them, pay attention, and get through them. And then once you finish the entire series, you'll go back and watch the first 5 again, and you'll be like, wow, these are actually really great episodes.
I look forward to that happening.
Yeah. Right at the top of the order, we should probably cover the cancellation and have that conversation. As I mentioned, Fox deemed the viewing figures to be quite low, and they took the decision to cancel it when there were only 3 days left of filming on the last episode to be produced.
And for that, I will never forgive Fox. In my opinion, the cancellation was 100% on Fox's shoulders. Because like we've discussed, people hadn't heard of it. It's a great show by a great producer and director, and nobody had heard of it. But then also, the episode order was a disaster. They started with an episode that had no setup to it. It just kind of jumped in. We don't know why River is so weird. We don't know anything about their backstory, really. And then they jump around also. And it was a disaster from the start.
Yeah, the support is definitely not there for it in 2002.
Yeah, I feel like had I watched this in 2002, I don't know that I would have even gotten 5 episodes in just because there's no watching it in order. I have so many questions about the world building, who the characters are, what their motivations are, and why they're doing what they're doing. But if I had to watch the episodes out of order, I feel like I would have been even more confused trying to come into it and understand what's happening. And so I just don't really know how the network could have expected anybody to stick with it, showing it the way they did.
So they aired a number of the episodes out of order. I think once we get through the first couple, there's only 2 more weeks where they get aired in order. Is that a response to what we've just been saying? It's not necessarily the greatest start of first 5. It's not the greatest start for a show. So the 2 that they moved up, and trying to avoid spoilers here, are Our Mrs. Reynolds and Janestown. Was that a response, perhaps, to try and go, oh, let's move up the ones that we think people will really enjoy and get into? Probably not something we can answer here.
I don't know.
I certainly can't.
Answer to that question.
Okay.
No.
What they also did is they started preempting it with other shows. So there were a couple of times that they put a baseball match on instead. I think they even put a rerun of a film on as well. So it was a bit hard for a continuing audience to tune in the same time every week to catch the show. So there's definite fault there for Fox, which is problematic. But we got these 14 episodes. So that's what we're going to look at, and that's what we're going to talk about. Mandy, there's the same sort of questions that I ask you every time. What were your expectations going into Firefly?
I had already seen the movie. Don't ask me why I watched the movie when I had never seen Firefly. I was confused as crap watching the movie because I didn't know who any of these people are or what they were doing or why. And so I really don't remember much of the movie. I just really remembered the character of River. And for some reason, and I don't remember what she does in the movie or what happens, but I just have this image of a screenshot in my head of Summer Glau as River, and I feel like she was a total epic badass in that movie. And that could not be true, but that's just my memory. And so that's been my expectation going into this show is that this is a show that's mostly about River and that she's this like superhero human who's crazy kind of thing. And yeah, so
Completely different,
you
huh?
know, yeah, in these 5 episodes, nothing that I expected has happened in these 5 episodes. I still assume that by the end of the run, I will like it just because everybody who likes what I like loves it. And we'll just have to see.
And that's going to be an interesting conversation when we get there, I think, because obviously there was an element of Serenity to make sure new audience could get into it and could understand it and enjoy it. If you think it didn't work in that frame, then that's something we can definitely dig into. So, what was your experience of the other Joss Whedon shows?
Well, I'm pretty sure I've already established that Buffy is the best show in the entire universe. So there's that. I own it on DVD. I've watched it all the way through 6 or 7 times, and I'm working through it now as I catch up on Story Wonk's Dusted podcast. I've also seen all of Angel multiple times, but not quite as many as Buffy. When Dollhouse came out, I did start that show, but I never finished it because I never really got into it, though I've been told I should probably give it another chance.
A side note, Dollhouse was another awesome Joss Whedon show that was canceled way too soon, in my opinion.
Yeah, Dollhouse arguably got a second season because of what had happened to Firefly. No one wanted to be that person to do it again. Um, and I think there's a series Terminator, the Sarah Connor Chronicles, which has Summer Glau in it. Again, had 2 seasons, and there is a suspicion that had the same thing of, oh, perhaps it'll get an audience, perhaps it'll sell well on DVD like Firefly did. And so, just looking at the genre, do you have much experience with the sort of sci-fi, space opera type of show?
I can't say I have experience with this like space cowboy kind of show, but in general, I'm a big fan of sci-fi and space shows. You guys already know that Star Trek, the original series, is on my giant list of things Mandy hasn't seen, but TNG is a huge favorite. I've watched it all the way through a couple of times. I also binge watched Battlestar Galactica last summer and absolutely adored it. Can't believe I had never watched it before. Big fan of Stargate Atlantis, and I think that counts as space, even though it's kind of underwater sometimes too.
Quasi space.
Sure.
Star Trek's a great reference. Star Trek itself was originally touted as Wagon Train to the Stars. So it was based off the, cowboy and western shows they had at the time in the 50s and 60s, but with a space setting. So we're sort of coming full circle.
I guess that makes some kind of sense, knowing what I know about Captain Kirk and his personality as a character. Even though I don't know the stories of the episodes, of course I'm familiar with the characters. And of course I've seen the reboot movies, so I kind of know about that. And I can see him being kind of like a renegade outlaw kind of captain.
Okay, so the big question is, from what you've seen so far, do you like it?
I don't dislike it. How about that?
Simple answer.
That's really all I can give you right now because with these 5 episodes, I still have a lot of questions. I feel like there's been a distinct lack of world building. I was talking to Sarah about this last night, and she brought up the point that it's subtle world building versus no world building. And I think the difference there is that my expectation going into this is that these 14 episodes are a complete package just because, which is silly. I mean, I know it's not. It got canceled, so it was unexpectedly canceled before they even finished filming. But Firefly is such a fan favorite, and so many people love it and the world and the characters that it just kind of turned in my mind into this one complete whole unit. And so to be 5 episodes in and to not understand the world is throwing me for a little bit of a loop.
And that's something that also, like you said, or like we've discussed, it's really subtle building that world building that if you really kind of take it slow and really look into the tiny details, you'll start to understand it more. But if you're just casually watching the show, it's not going to pop out to you.
We'll see how I feel after we watch the whole show.
Cool. I will put that as a question for a future episode. Do you have questions for us? Are there things that have thrown you for a loop or that you want to dig into more?
So many questions. So, I mean, let's keep talking about the world a little bit. I don't understand what's going on just because it's not really explained beyond they used up the world, they went and terraformed other planets, and then there was this big battle because the central planets became the alliance. There were people who were fighting the alliance. Great. I don't know anything about the cultures of those worlds and who won and who was fighting and why they were fighting. But then all of a sudden, we get this world that's some combination of the Old West and East Asian. And I don't know why. And it's weird. And then let's just throw longswords in there for fun. Let's have some medieval Europe in there with longswords. So I don't
Rapiers.
really get it. And I know that the three of us have talked a little bit about this in preparation, and so apparently some of it will be explained in the future. Some of it was explained in the DVD commentary, which I am not watching, and I feel like should not be canon because if you can't get that information out of the show, then it doesn't exist.
Well, I mean, somewhat, but yeah, there's a little bit more explanation later on in the following episodes. But a fun fact about the Asian thing is, in addition to using the Chinese phrases and characters just to add to this setting, the just a little behind the scenes detail, they used it to get some really nasty sayings through the censors so that they didn't have to beep them out, so they could just say it and go on. And when you're watching it, you're like, wow, that's something I don't understand. But if you look up the meanings behind some of those things, it's really, really dirty. Funny dirty, but really dirty phrases. There's a really awesome website that I'll have Mandi link to the show notes, but you should check them out.
Yeah, it's really clever because it's only a few times they do that, once a show or so. The rest of them are all kind of, good luck or where are you going or just casual
Exactly.
expressions. They just happen to be in Chinese, and just every so often there's something quite rude in there. How dare
Yeah.
they?
Okay, my next question. Who or what is River, and does she have a connection to the Reavers? I don't want spoilers, but that's what I'm thinking about her after watching these 5 episodes.
You're just going to have to wait and see, I think.
Well, that's no fun.
Yeah, just watch the
Okay.
show already.
Yeah.
And we haven't actually seen the Reavers yet. They talk about them. I know that they're kind of the big bad of the show. And are they contagious? Are they psychologically contagious? Is that even a thing? Oh, I can't even remember the name of the episode now. But the one where they found the survivor on the ship that had been destroyed by Reavers, he tried to turn himself into a Reaver and so I'm trying to figure out, based on the way Mal was talking about it, it seemed more psychological than physical. And that's just weird to me. It's fascinating. And I'm looking forward to finding out more about the Reavers.
Yeah, he describes it as something like people that have gone too far out into space and gotten lost, I
When
think.
yeah, it's because the Reavers attack them. I think there's a line about you see that much darkness and there's only one place you can go.
That's the, yeah.
So I find the idea of something being psychologically contagious fascinating. So
Okay, so we've got two things to return to.
I think we have a lot of things to return to because I don't think you guys can actually answer any of my questions.
Yeah, it's not looking like it so
No, and
far.
I will admit part of why I don't want to answer some of these, I don't want to say, oh, hey, they only got 14 episodes, so that never comes up again.
Right. I
But
understand.
there is this thing that they only got 14 episodes, so it'll be interesting to see what you can glean from it as we go through.
Specifically more world building, why is the alliance bad and what are the browncoats fighting for or against? Or I guess what were since the war was 6 years prior, but they don't tell us. And so I know Mal has this really great line where he says something about he may have been on the losing side, but he's not convinced it wasn't the right side, which I think is a really great line, but I would love to see that explored a little bit more so I understand why he thinks his side is right. What were they actually fighting
So
for?
this is something else that they kind of hint at throughout the episodes. It's more of the idea that Mal and the Browncoats and the Independents don't want this massive giant government to be all ruling, all encompassing, to tell everybody whether they want to or not that they have to be part of it. So it's really about freedom in Mal's mind, I think.
That actually makes sense. One of the quotes of his that I wrote down because I liked it was when he said, "That's what governments are for, to get in
Mm-hmm.
man's way."
Yep.
Yeah, that's a great line.
So, I mean, it's a pretty quotable show if you're paying attention or if you've watched it a lot. So,
Yeah.
I would love to know more about Jane because he is a spectacular asshole and I can't figure out what his role is other than just being mean.
I love Jane. Jane's one of my favorites. He is such a jerk, and he's stupid, but there's just this endearing quality to him that I just cannot get away from. He's fantastic. He's got great character.
Not yet. Maybe
Well, I
it
don't mean
comes, but
character like
not
he's a
yet.
good person, but just like
Oh,
whoever.
no, no, I understand. I think he's an irredeemable human being right now, and so I would love to see if that changes.
And we will see when we get there.
Yeah, I feel like that's the answer for everything. How on earth did the King James Bible survive 500 years in the future when the world is pretty unrecognizable? And why is it even part of this world? That threw me for a loop.
I was actually also wondering that, and I think maybe because they show it more in the less developed and poorer planets. Maybe it's a parallel to our current world, but I don't know for sure. That's just my idea.
Yeah, it completely blew my mind that the community that kidnapped Simon so that he could be their doctor declared River a witch and was going to burn her at the stake. I mean, this is 500 years in the future, and they're using the King James Bible as their motivation. And I guess that's more of a statement of Joss's worldview than anything, but I found it implausible in this scenario.
It is over 400 years old already, so it's doing well for itself.
Fair enough. You're absolutely right there. So maybe my own bias is showing here. So
And I think, if we look at holy texts, they do tend to last.
I guess it's
That's
just
true.
it's the idea that I mean this is not America anymore and they're on a different planet. And so it just seems different, but I guess that's my own bias coming in of what things should be.
It's still the same people, though. They came from the Earth that was, and they bring their culture with them.
Fair enough.
And that's the beauty of doing Planet of the Week stuff, in the old Star Trek lingo. You can go and do, hey, let's do a sort of religious group this week. Let's go and do a desperate group this week.
Okay, last question I have right now.
Okay.
If Firefly is such a huge fan favorite and cult hit, why did Gorham never become part of the nerd vernacular the way that Frack from Battlestar Galactica did?
So it is. It is in some circles.
Okay, I've never heard the word.
I've never heard anybody say frack, honestly. And maybe it's just because I'm not paying attention, but I think it's the same thing for you. Like, if you don't know that it's a thing, if somebody says it, you might think that they're just using it in place of the actual dirty version of the word. Same thing with shiny. Like, you and I discussed this last night at dinner when we were talking about the podcast. You hadn't noticed shiny popping up throughout the episodes, but they used it in such like a casual way that it's something you really have to pick up on. But Firefly lovers, all these nerds around here, they use shiny to describe things that are great. But if you aren't kind of in that cult, the Firefly cult, you're not going to notice it like you would if you are. Does that make sense?
First of all, I love that you described it as cold. That just makes me laugh. Second, the only reason I know that shiny is a thing is because of people on Twitter. I still haven't. caught it in the wild listening in these 5 episodes. When I went back and rewatched the intro, the Battle of Serenity intro, and the voiceovers, just to kind of make sure I hadn't missed anything, I did hear Wash kind of say it in a very throwaway line, like I wouldn't have even picked it up if we hadn't been talking about Shiny earlier that night. And so I still don't get it. I'm assuming I'm going to hear it more in the upcoming episodes, but it's still not a thing that I get at this point.
Now that it's been called to your attention, you'll hear it all the time. As I was going back and rewatching the first 5 episodes last night, it's sprawled like all through it. It's in every episode and several times per episode. In the first episode, the pilot had it like at least 4 or 5 times. It's just like I said, it's something that is part of their normal conversation. They don't draw attention to it. It's just like if I was going to say something's great or something's good, or it's just a normal
Shiny.
part of conversation. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
The one I always like is, I think, is the train job where Jane gets drugged by the doctor, and as he starts flaking out, he's like, it's just all shiny,
Yeah.
Huh.
and it could stand in for so many things there. And I think you're absolutely right, Sarah. Shiny is the word that everyone kind of picked up on to take from Firefly. You're not. It's not so easy to take away Chinese expressions. You don't truly trust what the translation might be. And the other issue with Goram is the way it's used. It's really similar to the word it's replacing. It has a couple of G's, a couple of D's in the middle there.
Yeah.
So it's very easy to mistake it for something. Whereas frack is quite similar to the word they kind of replace, but not so similar.
Right.
And I'm going to pimp up Farscape here. It has a replacement word for every single swear you can think of.
We'll get there one day.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to try and dig in a little bit on some of the themes and some of the content of the shows. What was it about the setup and the characters that stood out to you and grabbed you most?
So, as I was watching, each character kind of seemed to serve a purpose. Shepard is there for exposition, Wash is there to be quippy, Jane is there to be the one that everybody hates, Kaylee's the sweet one, and oh, hey, as I'm writing this out, I realize this is the 5 man band trope, right?
Yep.
And for those who aren't familiar with what that is,
I have no idea what that is.
the 5 man band is a TV trope where basically you have a group of characters whose members fall into very specific archetypes who all work together. So typically you have, the leader, the lancer, the smart guy, the big guy, and the chick. But I kind of expanded that here because we've got, there's more than 5 characters, but it's still, I think it fits because each person kind of has their own role. So that's what I thought.
Yeah, and one of the great things about Firefly, that I think we've even seen from these episodes, is all the roles are fairly interchangeable. Jane is the big guy for the most part, and Zoe's the Lancer. Kaylee is the heart, but also so is Wash, and so is Shepard. Shepard is also the brain, but not all the time. Every so often, he drifts into something else, or he becomes exposition dump man.
In these 5 episodes, he was definitely the exposition dump man.
Yeah, he. If we're going to look into character a bit deeper, which is probably the thing to talk about, you had some quite strong reactions to them, and Shepard even says, "I wish I could help. I mean, I don't want to not help with the thieving, but I do feel awfully useless." And I always find it funny when a show points out, like, we've not figured out what to do with this character yet, so he's going to tell you all the interesting stuff.
Right.
A bit later on, though, Simon thinks that the captain's going to hand River over to the Alliance, but it's the Shepherd book who stands up and he supports him wholeheartedly. So you can see he's kind of understanding what's going on, the different characters at play here, and coming through as the heart, the Lancer, putting all the roles into one there, and so it's a moment that I absolutely love.
Yeah, Shepard's definitely a really interesting character in the fact that there is just like when he's first there, he just seems like another church guy that is along for the ride, and he's there for no other reason than to be there. But then as you get farther into the episodes, especially in the 5th episode, when he gets shot and the Alliance is trying to say, no, we're not going to take him on our ship, and then they run his ID and they take him immediately, you're like, wait, there's something more here to this. Like, this is not all that it seems. And so he's one of the more compelling characters to me because of this.
I just have to say I'm confused about who he is. It's clear they're setting something up. I just don't know yet.
Yeah, and that's a really nice, subtle slow burn at this point. There's a line in, again, I think the train job, where he knows who the big criminal Niska is, and Jane turns to him and says, "How would a shepherd know who he is?" The show moves on and ignores that even happens, but it's just building up ever so slowly. The same sort of way that Whedon learned to do through Buffy, set things up for later episodes.
That's that subtlety that we were talking about.
Mm.
It's a beautiful technique on how to build this story, build the world up.
But going back to my previous comment about coming into this expecting it to be a complete package, even though I know it's not, the problem with that kind of slow burn is if you do get canceled early, it doesn't pay off. And I am afraid that none of these things are going to pay off.
That's a valid fear, I guess.
Hashtag
That,
no comment, I'm guessing.
that is absolutely something that can happen. Who knows? There is no way of finding out.
Give me a couple more weeks, guys.
Um, on your thoughts about the episodes as you were watching them, the second highest number of comments on a character were probably about River, and you said up top she's different than what you expected.
She is. I'm a little disappointed in River's character right now because, like I said, based on my very fuzzy memory from the movie, I expected her to be the main badass. I don't know why. Seems to be completely wrong, but that's just what I was expecting. And so to find her to be so childlike, so innocent, so incapable so far is really frustrating to me. And I'm trying to just roll with it and see where her story takes her. But so far, she seems to be pretty useless.
Well, she kind of she's got the obvious brain damage that they mention. I think at one point Simon mentions that she has paranoid schizophrenia brought on by whatever experiments the Alliance did to her or whoever did to her. And she, like in the episode, the Shindig episode when Badger is on the ship, and she just randomly starts talking to him in his accent and almost with his Badger personality almost.
Mm.
It's completely out of nowhere, and that kind of makes me feel like they were setting her up to be like she's not just like Shepard, like she's not all that she seems either, or she's more than what she seems.
I think the reason it frustrates me so much is because it doesn't seem like it fits with the rest of her. There was another moment in Safe where she became completely coherent talking to Simon about how she understands that he had to leave everything for her and that he's taking care of her. And that it took me out of the story a little bit because all I could think of is okay, 5 episodes in and she's finally making sense. And so I guess I can see that when you put those two scenes together, Joss is trying to do something, to tell us something, to set something up. But for me, those two instances, and there may be more, just were so far removed from how she has been portrayed the entire rest of these 5 episodes that it didn't make sense to me.
Well, also in the pilot episode, when they first find her, when Mal kicks open the box and she's laying there, Simon says she's not supposed to wake up for another week. And so it might have something to do with that, how she's kind of, since she prematurely woke up, maybe she's in this almost lost state. And then she slowly kind of start becoming more of the River that you were expecting from the movie, just slowly. But I don't know.
I guess I'll find out.
I do want to comment briefly on Summer Glau, who plays River. Um, it reminds me a bit of Gwendoline Christie in Game of Thrones, a character without much dialogue. To really portray well, you have to do a lot of very physical actions, and she does that so well. Obviously, she runs around, she skips and she dances and she cowers in corners, but it's the sort of facial expressions. It's one moment I wanted to call to, again, I think in the train job, in the opening when she wakes up, and she's having a massive freak out and shouting and hitting things. And Simon says to her, do you know where you are? And she just gives him a look. Like, yes, I know where I am, but I'm having a freak out, okay? And you can see they're giving us something slightly more to do and just showing us a little insight of, she's not a completely lost or hopeless character. But it's so well portrayed, and I have a lot of appreciation for her giving us giving that to us, despite not having the moments of clarity.
Maybe I will come to appreciate her more. That's all I can say.
Just bear with it.
Going back to your big list of the thoughts you had whilst watching them, there were one or two comments about Jane. We've
Just a
touched on
few.
him already. Lovable, all round nice guy, completely selfless there for everyone. Jane.
Spoiler alert for you guys if you weren't paying attention. Mandi hates Jane.
Jane is like the anti-hero almost. He's like I've already said, he's big and dumb and stupid and awful and only out for himself. But there's just something about him that I like. The dude is hilarious. And usually in the end, he comes back around to do the right thing. There was in the I can't remember which episode it was. The one where Summer was not Summer, where River was being burned at the stake.
Oh, in safe.
That was safe.
It's safe. Yeah, he was bugging the hell out of the crew to just go. Let's go. Let's leave them. But then he's part of their big rescue at the end. Like he just came around to do the right thing.
He
And
did
that's
not come
something that
around
I
to
really
do the
like.
right thing. He did what his captain told him to do.
Yeah, but he's still Jane. He's still gonna say no, I'm not gonna do it if he doesn't want to.
I don't think he will. I don't.
Unless there's money in it for him.
Right, actually, that's the thought that I'm looking at right now. In Bushwhacked, my second thought was Jane only gets on board when there might be money in it for him. And I can't stand that in a person. I think he's despicable. I think I haven't seen a single good quality about him so far. I cannot believe that he pushed everybody to leave Simon, and then when they did, he went and stole all his stuff. Although I think it's hilarious that when they got him back, he ran in there and put it all back really fast. But
That
I
was
just
hilarious.
I can't find anything redeemable about him right now, and maybe that will change because I know a lot of people really like him, but I've never been a fan of the villain ever. And I guess
Uh,
he's not really a villain because he's part of the good guy crew, but he's just a terrible human being, and I don't like terrible human beings.
that's where you and I differ. I always love the villain, especially if they're the ones that you are meant to love to hate. And that's exactly what Jane is. He is meant to be there for you to hate, but love to hate all the entire time.
From a storycraft perspective, it's really clever to have some sort of internal antagonization from a character because you have this, the Alliance, this big, faceless thing that might be an enemy. You have the Reavers that haven't really come to anything tangible yet, but if you need someone to push back against the crew, hey, one of your crew can do it for you. I also love the bit where he goes and steals the stuff from Simon and River. Dear Diary, today I was pompous and my sister was crazy. We were kidnapped by hill folk, never to be seen again. Best day ever.
Okay, he did make me laugh there. I will say that.
That's
And I
that's
did
what I'm saying. He's
misspeak.
funny.
There was one thing Jane said that I actually really, really liked because it was a great line. When they were in the Alliance ship, when Book was getting treated, Jane says, "This place gives me an uncomfortableness." And I just love the phrasing of that.
There is, I don't think we've seen it yet. There is a Jane line in a future episode that I use every time I say that word. So I will point it out when we get there. But it's one of those ones where when I watched it after not having seen it for a long time, I went, "Oh, that's where I get it from." Okay,
Yeah. Okay.
so we can cover some of the rest of the crew. Is there anyone else we wanted to touch on or talk about how they're being portrayed and presented?
I'm interested in hearing Mandy's thoughts on Inara.
I love her. She actually may be my favorite in the crew right now. And honestly, I love her so much because she is a very positive portrayal of a sex worker, and I think that's amazing, particular to be on TV in 2002.
Yeah, never mind a portrayal of a sex worker. It's a good portrayal of a woman. She is confident, she knows what she's doing. The thing she says to Atherton at the end about that's not how it works, I'm going to blacklist you, and just stands up to him. She's not simpering, she's not a princess, she's not there to be rescued.
Yes, that scene like made my heart go all aflutter. It did. Was there something that you hoped I picked up on her already, Sarah? Something more that
I
you want me to talk about?
I was just curious on your thoughts of her profession. Actually, I'd like to hear or what your thoughts are with her and Mal's relationship up to now, how they interact with each other. What do you think about that?
I think Inara is a mature, respectable, grown woman, and Mal is a child. I mean, it's it's clear that they have feelings for each other, but Mal expresses those feelings about her by calling her a whore, which is what little boys do on the playground when they pull little girls' pigtails. And Inara is just kind of waiting for him to grow up, I think. So I'm looking forward to seeing if we ever get the end game of that relationship, because it seems clear to me that they're trying to set up an actual relationship, but with only 14 episodes, we may never get there because things like that never happen in only 14 episodes. And I think it's cute, but I also think Mal needs to learn better than to insult the woman that he has feelings for.
As a question then, and I'm going to try and give you a frame of reference for this. In the popular television show Friends, there
Hmm.
was a character called Rachel who had an on-off again thing with the smart guy, Ross, but it ran so long they had to try and put her with other members of the cast. So they put her with the fairly dumb guy, Joey, the hot one.
Oh.
And to do that, they had to dumb her character down. So she spends about a season being way more ditzy than anything we'd seen from her before. Would you, at this point, rather see Mal get better or Inara get sillier, to put it in a nice way?
Oh no, Mal needs to get better because he is a great character. He is a great leader. He only gets dumb when he's around her. And so that part of him needs to be elevated. He needs to figure out how to be the kind of man that she needs him to be in that way.
Well, I think in a sense, she already kind of gets to his level a little bit, even if it's more intellectual or in a more intellectual way. She can go like punch to punch with him. You know, she doesn't back down. Like you said, she's a strong woman, so she
Mm.
knows how to respond to him every time he's being shitty like that.
She does, and she absolutely holds him accountable for it. She calls him out on calling her a whore, and I love that about her. But that means that their relationship can't really grow until one of them changes. And in that situation, I think it's Mal who needs to.
And she does also take him in the sword fight when she's training him.
Yeah.
You know, she's
Absolutely.
she's certainly his equal.
I told you,
And
she's kind of my favorite of everybody
so
right
far,
now.
yeah, she's presented as better than him. Sarah, did you rewatch for these shows? And did you notice anything you hadn't picked up on before?
Yeah, I actually rewatched three of the episodes. The first three episodes, rewatched them twice, and then the last two, just one time. And then that was just for this podcast. I've rewatched the whole series lots of times, but every time I watch it, I catch something I hadn't noticed before. So, for instance, the subtlety that we've been talking about throughout this whole podcast. There's an example. The blue sun logo just pops up in the background all over the series, all over every episode. And it's like the Coca Cola logo in our real world. Like it's there, it's part of our life, but nobody calls attention to it because it's such a normal thing. And that's something that I really, really like about this show in particular is that there's stuff there. It's constant, it's normal. They don't try to be weird about it, they don't try to make it a thing when it doesn't need to be a thing, but it's there to kind of simulate real life. And that's something I just picked up on this most recent time that I've rewatched it. And then there's also the way Kaylee looks at strawberries
Ah,
just
sexy, sexy strawberries.
blows it blows my mind because it made me think about the fact that they live on a spaceship. They probably don't have fresh fruit like almost ever. And so in the first episode when Shepherd Book gives her the box of strawberries and she looks at them like they're sexy sexy strawberries as you
Yeah.
said, it just kind of made me laugh. And then again later in the Shindig episode when she's looking at the buffet, she does the same thing. And it kind of sets the world apart in a way, like the blue sun logo thing. It makes it feel more like a real world because you're not noticing that stuff, but then there's these other things that do set it apart. And I don't know, it's just fascinating to me.
Yeah, you've got to love a story that comes in part way into its running. Like you say, it's a real world, it's already in existence. These people have connections, they have histories with each other. We don't need to see it. One of the reasons I always think Star Wars is so successful is it opens in the middle of a battle, and they just start fighting, and you see this guy in black, we don't know who he is. And Firefly's so much the same. It's just they're doing a job, and then they go and pick up some passengers. So we can get a bit of audience exposition through the passengers coming on and learning about the characters, but they're just going about their business, and you just have to learn it as you go through. I'm sure that Joss Whedon has a thing for strawberries. We have it in Angel, not in Angel, in Buffy, where
Mm.
Willow is told she tastes like strawberries by evil, creepy magic guy.
Rack.
Rag, thank you very much.
I have a thing
Joss,
for strawberries, if that
yeah.
matters.
Is this an American thing? Am I missing something about strawberries?
Yeah, they're just really good.
Okay. No, I'll agree for that. Yeah, strawberries are great. It's very tasty. It makes good jam. But
They're okay.
And you would be wrong.
okay. I talked up top about how the train job was redeveloped as a new episode to cover for the pilot and to introduce people to the set situation and the setting. Do we think the train job works as a pilot?
Absolutely not.
No.
If
No, no way.
the train job doesn't do anything that a pilot should do, it doesn't introduce you to the characters, it doesn't tell you anything about the world, it just throws you into a scene with these people, and you just kind of have to watch them do what they do for no good reason. I mean, we don't get to see that Simon and River and Book are passengers. They just appear to be part of the crew in the train job because we're not told that they were picked up previously. You miss the whole part about River being frozen in a box, and that's kind of important for her character development, I think. And so I just don't understand how the train job could have been used as a pilot.
Those are my thoughts exactly, especially the part about River. Because in the train job, there's just this weird girl running around being flighty and weird. And you don't have any background as to why she's like that.
Yeah, it feels very rushed. All the backstory is given by Book in a very long shot at the beginning where he walks around the ship with Mel, and he just brings up basically everyone on the ship and comments on all their situations. Why would you harbour fugitives when you're trying to fly under the radar? Oh, there's so many heathens here. Lots of little comments like that, but it's really
Exposition
heavy-handed.
preacher!
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot of telling and not showing.
Yes. And the voiceover at the beginning, I think, was supposed to help alleviate some of that because the voiceover didn't exist in the intended pilot. But the voiceover that Shepard does really gives very little explanation other than, oh, hey, we don't live on Earth anymore. There was a war, and there's these two factions. And that's really all you get. And so you need to know more about the characters than you do about the world at that point, which is why I think it's an episode, I think it was in Shindig, where the voiceover switched to Nathan Fillion doing it. And his voiceover actually gives you information about the characters and the crew. And I appreciated that so much more and wish that we had always had that voiceover instead of books.
I'm going to do a bit inside baseball here. Are you watching these on Netflix or DVD or?
Netflix.
Okay. So is that like a beginning of every episode? There's a kind of previously on Firefly setup thing.
There is a previously on, yes, and then it goes to the voiceover.
Okay. I don't think I've ever seen this voiceover.
Really? It's at the beginning of every episode except for the pilot.
Ah,
On
Yeah.
DVD, on Hulu, on Netflix, on all of them.
I. Well, I'm going to go and look. I don't think I have that on my DVDs. That's really interesting.
Weird. Maybe it's a British thing.
Yeah. We just know what's going on. We can pick it up so easily. So, pfft.
Yeah, I can't imagine not having the voiceover just because that voiceover does give a small amount of exposition at least.
Mm. Is that like one in every generation a slave is born thing?
Yes, it's exactly like
Okay.
Yeah.
that.
Okay. Ooh, we should do an episode about best, intros to a show. Is it that or is it Space the Final Frontier?
Space, the Final Frontier is always going to win.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Getting back to the train job as a pilot, though, you're right. One of the big things missing is River, because there's an implication that this show is about her. She's the big mystery at the middle of it, and the actual pilot, the pilot Serenity, gives us that great opening to part two, with Simon talking about how good he is, and that his sister's even better, and it's a terrific moment to set everything up. Do we ever get anything else like that in these opening episodes?
Not until we get to Safe and we see the flashbacks. I think Simon expresses that in the flashbacks, especially when he's talking to his parents about her and how smart she is. But I think that's the only time that ever comes up again, at least in these 5 episodes.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's the first time they start talking about it, and that's the first, River and Simon episode. So it makes sense there, and it makes sense to introduce, baby Zac Efron at that point.
You picked up on that in my notes, didn't you?
Yeah.
That's who that is. I was wondering. I was like, I know that face.
I was so
Who is that?
excited. Oh my god, it's baby Zac Efron. Which is so weird to see him in Firefly. But it was great. I loved it.
Yeah, we all have to start somewhere. And is it important that River is Simon's sister, particularly in Safe? That's the first big episode. We see a lot of interaction with them, almost outside of the medical bay. And there's elements of it that are much closer. He admits he gave up everything for her, but that he would do it again. She's the most important thing to him, and it feels more like a partner rather than a sibling.
Okay, so for one thing, she's supposed to be young. She's still supposed to be kind of an older teenager. So having a partner at this age would be kind of weird, especially one that is so protective, that is so, I'd do anything for her. Might be a little overwhelming for the age that she's supposed to be. But then when Mal first opens Simon's box in the pilot, he thinks that Simon had purchased River as a sex slave.
Hmm.
So when it turns out that they are brother and sister, it really dispels any of the suspicions that anyone might have that something a little more amiss might be going on. It's really just this pure love of the two of them, and that's why Simon is so protective over her.
I also don't think it's strange to see a brother and sister have this kind of relationship. My relationship with my brother is not quite like that, but we also weren't raised together. And so I think having a brother who's so much older than his little sister would instill that level of protectiveness.
Yeah, I'd never really thought about it that she is actually a bit younger than perhaps she looks or comes across at times. So yeah, that's a nice way to put it.
TV does have a way of making actors look a little bit older than they actually are, probably from the makeup or because they cast older actors in the younger parts.
Hmm.
But Summer Glau does look a little older than the part that she's supposed to be in my opinion. And so it kind of it's important to remember that she is supposed to be somewhere on that teenager slash young adult line.
Yeah, with the exception of the dancing sequence in Safe, I can't think of anything else that where she plays it that young. And that's always a sequence that makes me smile because it is a lovely moment.
That is, it really is.
And when I think about it in context of the rest of the cast and the crew, we already have a married couple. It limits your options a bit when you have a pairing like that. Wash's storylines are always, I'm either doing something with flying the ship or I'm talking to Zoe.
Wait,
He
I'm
doesn't
sorry,
keep
Wash
doing
has
much
storylines?
else. Exactly.
Very, very short.
Yeah.
Okay.
And anything he does is he's either the pilot or her husband. He doesn't have anything on his own.
Or he's playing with dinosaurs.
He does get to drive the four-wheeler thing a couple of times.
Lucky him. And actually, the dinosaurs thing is really funny because that's one of the things you can see mentioned from Firefly all the time, and it's a couple of seconds at the beginning of the pilot, but it's really enduring.
It is really endearing. And I noticed there were a few other establishing shots, probably not even establishing shots, but in other episodes where they were just kind of showing Wash doing his pilot thing or whatever, and the little toy dinosaurs were in the background, and I just thought it was cute.
Very cute. So the writers of Shindig and Safe are well-known writers from the rest of the Whedonverse. Do you think these episodes stand up to their work elsewhere?
Jane Espenson wrote Shindig, and Jane
Hmm.
Espenson is an amazing television writer. She did so many episodes on Buffy, and I didn't, until you asked this question, I didn't know that she had written Shindig. But as soon as you said that, I thought, holy crap, this is absolutely a Jane Espenson script. It was very funny, very quippy. This is actually the episode where one of my thoughts was, does Wash ever get to do anything but be quippy once an episode? And Jane Espenson also wrote the Buffy episode in season 3 called Dead Man's Party, which has one of my all-time favorite Buffy quotes in it, where Oz tells us the difference between a gathering, a shindig, and a hootenanny. A gathering is brie, mellow song stylings. Shindig, dip, less mellow song stylings. Perhaps a large amount of malt beverage. And hootenanny, well, it's chock full of hoot and just a little bit of nanny. Jane clearly likes her shindigs.
She does indeed.
Drew Greenberg wrote Safe, and I have to be honest, all of his Buffy episodes were in season 6 and 7, and I haven't gotten there on my rewatch. So I'm less familiar, or at least recently familiar, with the stuff that he writes. But I do recognize that season 7 episodes of Buffy were very intense, and Safe was very intense. And so I can see some similarities just at that surface level.
Okay, that might be something we return to as we see more of the writers that we've experienced elsewhere. Talking about Buffy the Vampire Slayer, did you spot DeHoffman out of makeup?
The first time I watched this, I did not. It didn't even occur to me because, I mean, DeHoffman is a very, like, I mean, demon with horns and crazy makeup. And so it wouldn't have even occurred to me that he would be a human in anything. I have no idea what he looks like without his makeup on. But last night I went back and rewatched because I wanted to make sure I wasn't missing world building stuff. So I rewatched the beginning of Serenity, the pilot, and the voiceovers. And because you had put this on my, frame of mind, I recognized his voice and then realized who he was.
Yeah, so he's the captain of the Alliance ship, or the person in charge. I have no idea if they have naval ranks or not. And he's obviously in a number of Buffy episodes. He's in Firefly, and he's in an episode of Angel as well. He's the Doctor from season one's I Fall to Pieces,
Oh
which we
my
remember
gosh, you're
mostly for being
absolutely right.
kind of rubbish.
Absolutely rubbish. Not kind of rubbish. Absolutely rubbish.
I
I'm
love the way
polite.
that Joss Whedon has the same actors in a lot of his shows. Like Nathan Fillion was in the end of Buffy, and like you just said, this guy was in several different Joss Whedon shows.
Mm,
I think it's really wonderful because I don't know. There's almost this loyalty to it and this comfort. Like this person, even if it's a different character, and they are fantastic actors that can play different characters. It's still almost a comfort. It's like being home to see these actors bounce around to the different shows.
yeah, all the great creators and directors do it. Scorsese and Woody Allen and people.
Right.
John Hughes, obviously from a recent episode. They recast people in continual productions, and this chap Andy Umberger, let's go with that. He's one of the few who's in at least three of the Joss Whedon series. I think Eliza Dushku and Summer Glau might be the only other ones who can claim that.
I'm trying to think. I know Gina Torres was in Angel as well. And I feel like there just have to be more. But
There are definitely more.
I mean,
I
Amy
just can't
Acker
think of
did
them.
several things, and but they might not. All the things I'm thinking about may not be Whedon. I see her
Mm.
face, and I'm like, oh, I like her.
No, she's been in several of his things, movies included.
Yeah, there is someone else, but he's in a future episode of Firefly, so I'm not going to mention that.
All right,
Oh, and
You
the guy
can't
that
blame me.
plays Badger, he pops up in like every show ever. It's really
that's
awesome.
Mark Shepard. He is that guy who is in every show ever. X Files. He's actually a series regular on Supernatural right now, and he's been on Star Trek and just everything. I love him.
Okay,
And
so
just to touch on
tangent.
a final point on that, the cast of, or several of the cast of Firefly were in the game Halo ODST as well.
That's
Um,
true. I heard Nathan Fillion in, was it that one?
well, he's now in all of the Halo games. He's one of the main characters,
I was just
and
keeping track.
he's even got facial capture in there as well. You
Yeah,
basically play
I
as
was
Nathan Fillion.
playing I was playing Halo 5 actually
Mm.
recently. And it's the first Halo that I've played, and I was like, holy crap, it's Captain Mal.
Captain Tight Pants.
Because it actually is him. The character is modelled on
Yeah.
Nathan Fillion. It's really strange.
Yeah.
But I had a friend when it came out who said the only reason he played ODST was it's basically Firefly the game because of the voice talent.
Well, I know what my next game's gonna be
Yeah.
then.
And if we want to take it one step further, we have to do a watch of Much Ado About Nothing at some point
Oh, that's a great
because that
movie.
is filmed at Joss Whedon's house, directed by
Hmm.
Joss Whedon, and you're going to not pay no attention to it. You're just going to be spotting what people are from.
Yeah, it's chock full of Joss Whedon, his actors.
You're gonna make me put it on the list, aren't you?
Put it on the list. Okay,
That could be our big roundtable watch with lots of the Discord group.
so let's get back to Serenity a little bit. That pilot episode. Let's talk about the Battle of Serenity Valley. It's shown in the first around 5-ish minutes of the pilot, and then mentioned very sporadically throughout the rest of the episodes. Mandy, do you have any thoughts or questions about it?
I think I want to save all of my questions until the very end, when I've seen all of the episodes, because right now, all I've seen are the actual 5 minutes of the battle, and then I think it was mentioned maybe twice in the episodes, or at least twice that I remember in the episodes that I've already watched. And I mean, I've already asked my questions about understanding why they're even fighting it because that hasn't been explained. And so I think I'd like to just leave that question until I have all 14 episodes under my belt, and then I can know what questions I need to still have.
Fair enough.
And returning again to the train job as a second version of the pilot, the intro to the train job I think does the setup for the war better. Although seeing the Battle of Serenity Valley and seeing that this was the point at which they lost and it all went fairly south for Captain Reynolds, we get a lot more of the quippiness and the setup for how he is now in the train job, where he says he just wants a drink, but he's actually trying to set up a fight, and then it starts building us into this proper science fiction world with the hologrammatic windows and the spaceship coming in to save them.
I liked those holographic windows. Thought they were pretty cool.
And the advertising for Firefly on Wikipedia, they had a print advert for it, and it's got the logo, it's got the ship, and probably a third or more of the page is Nathan Fillion's face. And it just says, "This renegade captain is the galaxy's most unlikely hero, and he'll take you on a ride you'll never forget."
Okay.
He can take me on a ride
No,
if he
it's
wants to. Sorry,
you weren't on mute, you know that.
Totally staying in, by the way.
Oh, awesome. Hi,
But
Mom.
it's really setting it up that this is him saving the galaxy from something or somehow, which when you start watching the show, it's not. It's days of the lives of criminals.
Sort of. They're criminals with a conscience. I really liked that once he knew what they stole, that they gave it back.
Yeah.
That was a note from Fox. Joss Whedon had him going away and taking the medical aid,
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know
and
that.
yeah, the
Well,
network
now I don't
said
like it because I don't like Fox.
Just pretend you
make
never
him more
had that
criminal.
vision.
I like him having a conscience. I do.
Yeah, it is better for it. But equally, I'll restore your loathing for them. They didn't want Wash and Zoe to be married because
Oh.
there isn't I want to say unwritten rule. It's probably a written rule that you don't have happily married couples.
Well, that's what I liked about it because it's
Yeah,
different.
yeah. Mandy, in your notes, you have a comment about you enjoy found family. Can you elaborate what you mean on that, please?
So the closing shot at the end of Safe is when everybody's back together. Shepard is healed pretty nicely from being shot. He's back on the ship from the Alliance medical base. Simon and River have been rescued, and they're all having dinner together around the table. Even Jane. And it just, they're choosing to be there. They're choosing to be with each other. Shepard actually called Serenity home, and he's only been there for a couple weeks at most. And I really loved it, especially when you contrast it with the first meal that we saw around the table back. I'm assuming it was probably in the pilot when Mal made Jane leave the table. And so I just love that the relationships between everybody is evolving and that they are becoming family. And I like the idea of found family because they're people that you choose to have in your life and they're there because you want them to be. And I'm just a sucker, so.
That's a good point. At the very end of that fifth episode, Simon is asking Mal why they came back for him. And Mal says, "'Cause you're crew." And Simon says, "Well, you don't even like me, so why did you come back?" And Mal says, "'Cause you're crew." And I feel like that's the way that he's saying, because I care about you, because you're part of my found family.
Exactly.
It's really just a warm, fuzzy moment in the show.
It is. It's very warm fuzzy, and I like warm fuzzy things, even though I hate Jane. Have I mentioned how much I hate Jane?
But he is like you say, he's a part of the family now. And he did help out in rescuing Simon and River. So they're all there. It's a really nice contrast, that one scene for, I think it's in the pilot Serenity, where they're sat around the table and Book asks to say prayer, and he only takes offence if he says it out loud. So
Right.
to see them all happy and sitting around and having a nice time. I've just been looking up. It's probably a couple of months in by the time we get to the end of that 5th episode. They make a comment about the cows being on the ship for about a month. So if you assume it's a month between Shindig and Safe.
Oh, wow. Yeah, okay.
Oh.
Which makes Jane even more despicable then. But okay. Sorry, I can't let it go. I just hate him so much. Is there anything else we want to talk about for these 5 episodes?
No, I think we've got some good stuff stored up for to come back to for future episodes.
Yeah, I'm really eager to get on with the future episodes because there's so much I want to talk about, and I am having a really, really, really hard time not spoiling it for you, Mandy, but also want your initial impressions before I open my mouth. So, yeah.
Yeah, I actually, so there's a Firefly podcast out there from Common Room Radio called Mighty Fine Shindig. And they are going through it, right? They're about halfway through right now. And so I went and decided, well, I've seen the first 5 episodes now, so I'm going to listen to the first episode of the podcast where they talk about the pilot. And I was 10 minutes in and I realized I had to turn it off because they were referencing spoilery things. I mean, they weren't outright spoiling anything, but they were referencing world building and character traits that you learn over the course of the whole 14 episodes that I haven't seen yet. And so it made me sad because I really wanted to listen to it, but I'm trying to stay as blind and unspoiled as possible, which is really hard whenever you live on the internet like I do.
Yeah.
And it's a 15-year-old show.
And it's a
That's
15-year-old show.
But no, and that's a really good point because we've barely mentioned Kaylee, we've not really mentioned Wash. Two big characters that people will talk about or like or loathe, but we've not really seen them do much so far.
Yeah, I don't really have much to say about either one of them yet. Wash doesn't get to do anything but be quippy and be Zoe's husband. And Kaylee's just super sweet. I did really, really like when she called Simon out on what he said in Safe about how much he hated the ship and all of that stuff because she loves that ship. It's her home, it's her baby, and she let him know that she was not okay, that he was, being kind of a butt about it. And I did like that about her, but so far she's been mostly pretty forgettable, except
Well,
for the big puffy pink dress.
I was about to bring that up. She seems to have been raised as very much of a tomboy or like a daddy's girl type environment, but she seems to really want to fit in with Inara's culture, that real girly fashionista, that really slinky
Feminine.
feminine, that's what I was looking for. Yeah, so she was raised as or she seems to have been raised as more of a daddy's girl or a tomboy, but has this longing to be more feminine, to fit in with like Inara, and that's the puffy dress was perfect. She was so excited to be part of that party and wear that dress. And it's just, you know, the little thing about her that really stood out to me in these first 5 episodes.
I did really like that she was still proud of that dress and loved it even after the other women made fun of her.
Yeah.
That tells me that Kaylee doesn't really care what other people think, and I like that about her.
Yeah, she doesn't have much of a filter. She will just say what she's thinking, which is nice. And there's the dress, and there's the face she makes when she gets to eat the strawberries.
Yes.
Because they want you to know those are some sexy, sexy strawberries.
I want someone to look at me the way Kaylee looks at strawberries.
Oh, girl, me too. Nathan Fillion, if you're listening, give me a call.
We'll be back next week with another episode of Pop Culturally Deprived, where we'll talk about episodes 6 through 9 of Firefly. Until then, please remember to rate and review us on iTunes. If you want to get in touch, you can follow me on Twitter at Mandi K. You can email me at mandyk@popculturallydeprived.com, or you can comment on this post at popculturallydeprived.com. You can also find Matthew on Twitter at Matthew Vos and Sarah at Skeptically Sarah.
That is Sarah with no H, spelled the correct way.
Until next time, I'm Mandi K.
And I don't care, I'm still free. You can't take the sky from me.